Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this new episode of CCIR's Student Spotlight. With me today is Isha from Newton North High School in Boston. Isha is currently in the 11th grade, and Isha, while at CCIR, worked with Dr. Mushkatov from the University of Oxford on the physics and evolution of isolated and binary stars. So, first things first, Isha, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Isha, I want to just begin by talking a little bit about your journey to CCIR. So, I'm curious, sort of, what was it that first motivated you to consider doing a sort of research project, and in particular, focusing on astrophysics specifically?
Well, I've always wanted to do physics in some sort of capacity, and for the past few years, I've been looking for like research opportunities, but they've been pretty hard to find, especially for high schoolers, and especially in something as like advanced or complicated as astrophysics, which is kind of how I found CCIR. But as for physics, my dad, my grandfather, and my great grandfather are all physicists. So it kind of runs in the family. And it's just been something that I've always been really fascinated by, and, especially like astronomy. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm so curious about. So, you said your father, your grandfather. Was there one more person too in your family?
Yeah, my great grandfather.
Your great grandfather too. That's pretty crazy. That's so I guess growing up, were you sort of just kind of swimming in physics, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, my family would tell me all about like, the cool things that they would do at work, and it all seemed really interesting to me. Um, my father, he works in photonics, so not exactly astrophysics, but he took me to a museum once, which is where I first, really fell in love with like um astronomy and outer space. And I kind of wanted to combine that with physics, and that's how I landed on astrophysics.
That's super cool. So I'm curious, sort of before CCR, what sorts of other sort of in-depth have you done sort of a program that involves sort of physics at this kind of level before?
I wouldn't say at this kind of level, but I competed in the astronomy Olympiad.
Hmm.
I got to the second round, and so the national astronomy competition is, I believe, in April.
Hmm.
So I've been studying for that. And that was, I would say, was pretty advanced, but since it is like a timed exam, it was less like in depth as this kind of course.
Hmm.
I've also taken some like physics classes, both in and out of school. But it's never really been as like in detail, and it's also especially been more like Newtonian mechanics and things like that, as opposed to like, quantum mechanics and astrophysics.
Hmm. And I'm curious how that transition was for you, sort of moving from, I guess, AP Physics, and sure, already very hard. I struggled with that back in high school, but what was sort of the experience of making that leap, I guess, from uh, those sorts of that kind of physics to the sort of thing that you were doing with Mushkatov?
I think it was pretty difficult at first because the learning curve was like very steep. Like from our first session, we just like jumped straight into it. We didn't even talk about like, any of the like physics basics. We immediately started talking about like particle physics and quantum mechanics, which was something that I had never really gone that in depth for. And the first like homework problem set that we had to do was also very challenging. But eventually, as long as you kind of like reach out for help and all of that, it kind of stabilizes a little bit. But it was definitely unlike anything I had ever done before.
Mhm. Yeah, and tell me a little bit more. So Dr. Mushkatov is pretty amazing. I think he's the Stephen Hawking Fellow at his university. Tell me a little bit what it was like, sort of learning physics from him and working with him on these projects.
I think it was really amazing, and I'm so grateful that I got that opportunity to even just like interact with him. Obviously, he's like an incredible researcher and an incredible scientist, and I could also see he was very like passionate about like teaching and talking about his subject or his field, which made it very like engaging for me and my classmates to be in class with him and interact with him, he was also very like open with questions, and you could always email him if you had anything like additional, and he was just very supportive and overall like really amazing teacher.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Dr. Mushakov is easily one of our best mentors, I think. I want to follow that up with asking a little bit about I suppose, the peer-to-peer aspect of the program as well. What was it like sort of hanging out with four other kids that are, I guess, like as nerdy about this stuff as you are?
I think I was very lucky. I think me and my peers we got very close. We would have FaceTime calls. We made a group chat so we could, work on homework together and just like talk about our projects and things like that. Um, I think two of the people ended up working on the same project together, which I thought was very interesting. But they were all, it was really fun to like talk about these kinds of things, which generally I wouldn't talk about with other people. Um, and they were struggling the same amount as me with especially difficult problems and things like that. So it was a very nice sense of community. So I'm glad I wasn't like doing it alone.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think now is a good time to transition and ask you a little bit more about your own project. So maybe let's begin. So the usual way that the Future Scholar course unfolds is that the first 6 to 7 weeks, we're going to sort of focus on mostly doing teaching and sort of laying out the field for you. From there, you sort of begin sort of focusing a little bit more on the things that you're interested in. Tell me how you sort of came to the topic that you eventually chose.
So unfortunately, I was a little bit limited in my topic selection. I'm not very good at like programming, and I'm not very like familiar with many programming languages.
Mhm.
But it ended up all working out because I didn't really have to do very much of that. And I discussed this with my TA, and he recommended some projects for me. Um, and I thought that the topic that I chose was easily the most interesting, like including the ones that did require coding. And so yeah, that's how I landed on it. They all seemed like absolutely fascinating. So to me, I didn't really mind doing any of them because they were all within the field that I was really passionate about. But yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the specific project that you worked on. So this is the physics and evolution of isolated and binary stars. I guess the first question might be just from, let's say, if you were to give the abstract of this talk, um, what is sort of this paper focused on for us lay people?
Right. So essentially, my work focused specifically on neutron stars in binary star systems, and even more specifically, the accretion channels. So when there are two stars in a binary system, let's say like star one, which is usually more massive, it basically like accretes matter or like a flow of matter onto the second star, which in my case was the neutron star, which is what I focused on. And basically, that accretion flow is like its trajectory is dictated by magnetic field lines. And that was kind of what I was focusing on because it eventually creates an accretion disk, which just spins around the neutron star, which I thought was a very, very fascinating topic. And so I decided to explore the parameters and, how like the geometry of that accretion disk. And so, I factored in things like the magnetospheric radius, the mass flow rate, the mass of both or either of the stars, and things like that. And basically, using my very basic limited Python skills, I basically modeled that to show how the accretion disk would change if we were to hypothetically change those different parameters.
Hmm. I have a question to ask you, but I need to make a stupid comment about the twin sons of Tatooine. But but we move on from that, and I'm curious what in particular fascinated you about neutron stars in particular.
Well, I think that when I first heard that they were like their core was made up of basically nothing but neutrons, I thought that that was like unlike anything I had ever heard before. I thought that was very strange. And I thought it was really interesting. I can't really say why, but they've always been my favorite kind of star. Um, and so I wanted to just, focus especially on that. And yeah, he when the TA recommended that to me, I thought that it sounded really interesting. And I think most of the projects actually had to do with neutron stars in general, so worked
Mhm.
out.
Yeah. So I'm also now curious. So who was your TA?
Uh, Vladimir.
And tell me a little bit more about what it was like working. I mean, so one of the nice things about the Future Scholar program is that you really do have quite a bit more support and scaffolding. You have your peers, you have the TA, you have the faculty. So what was it like sort of working sort of with the TA through this program?
Um, it was really great. We were definitely very hands-on with Dr. Mustakov, but we were even more hands-on with the TA. We would have our meetings every Saturday, and he would have us essentially present like what we had done that past week. And usually it hadn't been like sometimes it would have been a lot, like we, accomplished a lot. We wrote half of our research paper, and sometimes it wouldn't be that much. He just wanted us to, give a brief update to everyone else. And, in our little group chat, we would give each other feedback, and he would give us feedback on what we needed to do next. He would also have us, um, solve for other things that were sort of related to our projects, but would help us later along. And yeah, he oversaw our work and was definitely very involved. I'm still in contact with him, just finishing up like the research paper. But yeah.
So tell me also a little bit about writing the research paper. Have you written anything quite at this kind? Have you written this kind of stuff before?
No. This was my first time writing a research paper. And it was pretty hard to get started, I would say. But the TA and Dr. Mushtakov would help me a lot with that. And they also, revised my work and would put in comments. And I used Overleaf, which I had never used before, which was like the LaTeX format for like research papers. And so, I was also getting experience in something that is going to help me later on if I do decide to go into research. Um, and yeah, I think as I sort of got into it and, got like familiar with, what I wanted to talk about or what I wanted to say, then it became a lot easier, but it was a bit hard to get started.
I think that's a great moment to transition into the final question that I always ask students during these kinds of interviews. Um, the question is this. Um, the program that you did is you are working super intensively at a level. A lot of students look at this and get a little bit nervous, a little bit daunted by the prospects of doing something like this. As someone who's come through the whole process, what is it that is there anything you'd like to say to a student who might be interested and excited about research, but ultimately a little bit nervous and daunted by it?
I think that the like peer and community aspect of it is very helpful. Because my peers were also high schoolers who are my age, who also we're still kids, we're still in high school. It's not like we know everything about astrophysics just yet. And that's okay, and your mentor is going to understand that and be very patient and make sure that you like actually grasp and understand everything. And this opportunity, like the one that you get at CCIR, is pretty rare. I would say there aren't very many other things like this for high schoolers. So I would say if you get that opportunity to absolutely take it because it's going to be fine. And even if you are falling behind at times, like I definitely was, there are people there who are going to be able to help you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really do try to give you guys a lot of support and scaffolding because we know that you're high school students. But it's really, really fantastic to learn about your experience here at CCR, to hear about the cool work that you've done. It's always, always a pleasure to talk with students like you, who have a Einstein poster above their bed and who are truly, truly so passionate about learning and about knowledge. Really, really exciting, and makes me at least feel like the work that we're doing here at CCIR has been sort of worthwhile. But with that, Isha, I just want to say thank you so much for your time today. It's been a joy talking to you, and best of luck in all your future astrophysical explorations.
Thank you.